Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. We are joined today by Minister Patty Hajdu and Nelson Barbosa from Indigenous Services Canada, who will be available for questions. And we are also joined by the following virtually: Elder Eunice Birdie, who will provide opening and closing prayers; Chief Wayne Moonias from Neskantaga First Nation; Chief Doreen Spence from Tataskweyak Cree Nation; Chief Emily Whetung from Curve Lake First Nation; Roy Moonias from Neskantaga First Nation, and Sharon Sackney from Neskantaga First Nation, as well as Harry Laforme, Michael Rosenberg, and Curtis Bergeron, who will be available for questions in the media avail. Following the opening prayer and remarks, we will have around 40 to 45 minutes for questions. We will start with any questions that we may have in the room, followed by Zoom, one question and one follow-up. If you have a question on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. Après les mots d'ouverture.
After the opening statements, we'll have approximately 45 minutes for questions and answers. We'll begin with questions in the room, followed by Zoom. One question and one follow-up per person. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function to indicate so.
Prayer from Elder Beardy.
Okay, semane tu nina kiwet no ke papas ko epe nanas ko meta ko ma kisi kami niya to perita metaya tayane mo tama ko hoke ko na pikas katen tamigo ya ke semane tu kinaga kinoge ko na kiskenta man ke kiskenta no mage ko na istimamu apia ke semane tu ego chuma akanata ko manipi ego siape yam witap metaya egawas me epagosenta ma ko me gawas me to chonat stan wa ko manipi egesken tama ko maninan kakinoge kon ego tawchma sima ga ko ma nepi maga monegiskisanan wanuma is bisika kanata ko ma nepi ago ogo Tenimenan, epagosenta mata soeni machikisemanito, epagosenta minata sawenta manuhuge gona pagit na mata tiwichigo yaho tenigane, egawasme tan sona chigo yaho ma nipian sona tistano kisemanito, kinaga kinoge gone minta humegani nane kaskistayak maga, ekitimagistawiyak. Mana hoge gwana pagosenta ma tuiti hia kisemanito egoma anustagisiga sawenta uma nepi kisemanito egoma sigo ya ko ya sewitigo ya ko manepi agimini ya tuitigo ya astogisiga one masuena kisemanito ego destinigo ya mine witigo ya astogisiga mitsu ya kisemanito ego we just magashmino manepi oho maski hiya vista wauta ma si magahe besemanito ago mino go no ako maganan patagiyak nipi haya pastate kisemanito witehinan goyastan sidostamako magoyastate wanastan wako hoge gona apagosenta ma This anustagisika kisemanito witihinan dastagisika wenas komitah mino kutagisika minoya wenehese witihia hotana yapia kisemanito so when mikah kenotaya petik visto algo estate modata ko hoge kona mikuskaten tamigo ya dastagisika kisemanito so when mikmino go anigan iskahikis iskonigana hegada kabistite kegada Sagwani muchiko hoke gona pagosenta kisemanito. Nas kumitnan gitamagistawya kisemanito. Nas kumitnan mina tastugisiga o isaginisken hewitiya. Tastugisiga hoke gona eganina nagos kaskistaya maga hewitiya kaskistana no kisemanito. Nas kumitnan sagiwe wenehisi ewapasniya tastugisiga Semanito nas komitnan kahinon huwa kumaga nagmina egusani hay teton hay amen 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Elder Beardy, for starting us off in such a good way. Thank you. Tanzi, Anine, hello, bonjour, merci.
Thank you for joining us for this update and announcement on the First Nations drinking water settlement reached last summer and approved by the courts over the winter. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin peoples.
Quickly, before we jump into today's update on the First Nations drinking water settlement, I did want to say that we know that COVID-19 is still having a very significant impact on First Nations communities at this particular time, and I want to assure communities that Indigenous Services remains ready to help whenever and however we can. Our officials in Ottawa are working with many communities as we speak, and our regional offices are there just a phone call away if anything is needed, and there still remains funding available through the Indigenous Community Support Fund in our efforts to protect each other. So back to the reason that we're here. Thank you so much for joining us on this very important day as we provide an update on the First Nations drinking water settlement now that it's been finalized and implementation is underway, and announce that the claims period is open. So those who are seeking compensation through settlement can now apply. Again, Elder Beardy, thank you for your opening prayer. I'm thrilled that we're joined today by Chief Wayne Moonias of Neskantaga First Nation, Chief Doreen Spence of Tataskweyak Cree Nation, and Chief Emily Whetung of Curve Lake First Nation. And as well, there are community members from Neskantaga and Tataskweyak as well, who will be available and will share some of their lived experiences. For the questions and answers portion, I'm thrilled to be joined by officials from Indigenous Services Canada, Nelson Barbosa, who's here with me, and Curtis Bergeron. Thank you again for being here, and representatives from Olthius Clare Township, the Honourable Harry Laforme, and from McCarthy Tetro, Michael Rosenberg. And they will answer questions on the settlement process. Through this settlement agreement, Canada accepts the role that the government has played in First Nations' lack of access to clean drinking water. The settlement acknowledges the significant harm and discrimination that First Nations people have felt and experienced at the hands of the Canadian government. The settlement also ensures, however, that safeguards are in place so that we can rebuild trust and confidence amongst First Nations in their water supply and in their relationship with the Government of Canada. Nous envoyons.
We are also sending a clear message that future generations of First Nations children will have access to safe drinking water. This regulation builds on the investments our government has made since 2015 to eliminate long-term drinking water advisories in First Nations communities and prevent their recurrence.
On December 23rd, 2021, and now individuals who have been affected can file their claims. There's detailed information about the settlement agreement with links to apply for compensation online at firstnationsdrinkingwater.ca. This web page is managed and operated by representatives for class members. As mentioned, full details of the settlement agreement are available online, and implementation is now underway. And this includes our commitments to invest at least $6 billion for reliable access to safe drinking water on reserve, $1.5 billion in compensation for individuals, $400 million for a First Nations Economic and Cultural Restoration Fund. This is money that will go directly to communities, and that funding has now flowed from Canada to administrators to do the work. And an ongoing and renewed commitment to lifting all long-term drinking water advisories on public systems that are on reserve. The creation and operation of a First Nations Advisory Committee on Safe Drinking Water that will provide guidance and recommendations to Indigenous services on policy initiatives, and a plan to modernize Canada's First Nations drinking water legislation and support to First Nations so they can develop their own safe drinking water bylaws and initiatives. And on that last front, I can tell you that the repeal of the Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act is included as part of Budget 2022 measures, and we hope that Parliament will review this legislation quickly. This is something that First Nations have long advocated for, and I'm hoping to be able to provide updates this year on replacement legislation as we continue engagement with Indigenous peoples on that work. I can only imagine how frustrating and heartbreaking it has been for people working so hard to address this issue. This crucial issue today is a critical movement, and the settlement agreement is an important step. And I'm very glad that we're here. I'd like to thank the leadership of Tataskweyak Cree Nation, Curve Lake First Nation, and Neskantaga First Nations, not only for their efforts on behalf of their communities and people that live in their communities, but really for all First Nations members who have lived with non-drinkable water for far too long. I can tell you that as of today, 132 long-term drinking water advisories have been lifted in First Nations communities since 2015. In addition, 215 short-term drinking water advisories have been prevented from becoming long-term. And we continue to work on the remaining 33 long-term drinking water advisories so that everyone can have clean drinking water. I want to be clear that the settlement agreement is only one part of the work that we're doing with First Nations. While our work on lifting advisories continues, our focus is very much on preventing boil water advisories from becoming long-term in community, building capacity, and building accountability. This work is reconciliation in action, and it can only be achieved in partnership with First Nations. All families and all communities should have access to clean drinking water. That is our goal. That is our resolute commitment. We'll continue to work together. Thank you very much. And I'll now turn it over to community members Roy Moonias and Sharon Sakany, as well as Chief Moonias from Neskantaga First Nation, who will speak about their experiences. So I'll turn to you, Chief Moonias.
Okay, thank you, Minister Hajdu. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to share some of our experiences. As you know, Neskantaga First Nation is still under a boil water advisory, reaching now 27 plus years. So we have a couple members here that have worked tirelessly, worked hard to try to move this issue to the point where we can actually finally get clean, safe drinking water. They've seen, observed a lot of things that occurs in our community. So I want to ask first Roy Moonias. He's very knowledgeable in the community. He works on these projects like the water issue, and he has a lot of experiences and a lot of challenges that he's faced. And I wanted to give him an opportunity to share some of those things that we face as a First Nation community. Okay, Miigwech.
Okay, bonjour, Chair. Good afternoon, Honorable Patty Hajdu. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with Neskantaga First Nation. Also, I'd like to thank the elder for the prayer, the importance of the water she mentioned in her own language. And water is life to us, not only First Nation people, but everybody. So Chiefs, Miigwech, Dina, thank you, Chiefs. I wanted to say, some of you don't know where Neskantaga is. We originally were from Lansdowne House First Nation. Then we relocated west, about 7 miles west of Lansdowne House, and that's where Neskantaga is. And I've been living in Neskantaga since 1989. There was no infrastructure, no hydro, no water and sewer, no roads. Was commuting by canoe in the summertime to Lansdowne House. In the winter times, I would be commuting by snowmobiles. In Neskantaga, when the community started the relocation process, they wanted to see better life, living conditions that Lansdowne didn't have. We had so many challenges in the old community. And people say, we want to relocate. We want to move so our future generation can prosper, not live like what we experienced in Lansdowne House. We had no running water, nothing. Some of us had no hydro. Some of us lived in tent frames. We had no adequate housing. The only people that benefit was the government people. They had everything, water and sewer, everything. But us, as Anishinaabe people, Indigenous people, didn't have nothing. In 1993, that's when our water treatment plant was commissioned, in 1993. And to provide potable water to the community. All people were so happy that we have running water. Then as the water treatment plant arises issues like it was all governments doing, how they dictate what kind of system the community should have. I remember when I was in a meeting with, it was INAC, they used to call them a long time ago, saying that, okay, we'll try this system, a slow sand filtration system. And people didn't appreciate the water that was coming out. It was yellow. And here we have a water treatment plant in a community. You know, we've gone through a lot of negotiations with the government. Like I said, INAC, then they change over to AANDC. We negotiated with them. They changed over to Indigenous Services Canada. We've met so many ministers. And we're still struggling today. We don't have clean, safe drinking water today. Why is that? During the election campaign in 2015, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, in 5 years, every First Nation will have clean, safe drinking water. And still today, our community don't have clean, safe drinking water. The Neskantaga First Nation has the most prolonged long-term drinking water advisory in Canada. We've been counting days. Today, 9,948 days, or 27 years, 2 months, and 27 days. Initiated on February 1, 1995. People always question, why is that? Why is Canada doing this to us? We had our treatability study completed, and it sat there for many years collecting dust. I just wanted to say that because I feel like I'm somewhere in the dust, somewhere in the government of Canada. Our people here in Neskantaga. Today, our water treatment plant is incomplete, and our people have lost hope in this project. And the government of Canada should be accountable for the wrongdoing of this community and our people and myself. I want to just touch base on the class action. I myself don't support government's format. People have made so many comments. Why is government dictating compensation? 25 years I suffered, 27 years I suffered. My family and everybody in the community here. 27 years of buying bottled water in the store just to accommodate now I'm only entitled for 4 years plus 2 years, 6 years max. That is BS. Who made that call, the format? There's people here that are only going to get 6 years max. So frustrating. Okay, so I just want to say that I'm not in agreement with the settlement. Myself and the community. Also, I heard the community say the same thing. They're not in agreement. Thank you.
Chief Moonias, do you have other speakers from Neskantaga?
Hello, yeah, thank you, Roy. I know you can hear the frustration in his words. And obviously, when we talk about justice, when we talk about the fairness of and the treatments of individuals, basic human individuals, we often hear those kind of things. So Sharon Sakany is our next speaker. She's a health director, and she's been living here throughout the term of the BWA. So I'll get her to speak, and I'll close it off for a few minutes with some comments after. Thank you. Good.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the elder for the prayer, and thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Sharon Sakany, and I'm the health director for the community. I have been in this capacity for close to 10 years now. And over the course of the years that I've been working here, I've seen a lot. And, you know, this long-term well water advisory that's been in our community for 27 years. It's been, you know, like I've seen so many things happening, working at the, you know, working at the nursing station where people have, you know, suffered. They have suffered this, you know, 27 years. We had many people come into the nursing station where they have reported, you know, skin rashes and rashes from the water. Like they have no choice when they want to, you know, take a bath or wash their clothes. We don't have that capacity where we can use boiled water, water bottles to, you know, bathe with. So over the course of the years, I've seen so many things that has affected the community from this boiled water. I know one case where people with diabetes, this person who has diabetes had an infection on his foot, his leg, and what this person was told was to, you know, soak your feet. How can this person soak their feet 3 times a day when they don't have the proper clean water? We are asked to use bottled water, you know, to bathe, to cook, to clean, and that's not acceptable. We have many people in the community that are diabetic. And what ended up happening for this individual is that person ended up having an amputation, lost his foot. And those are the kind of things that we face today in all these years of by not having clean drinking water. Yes, we have community members that are still suffering today from this boil water. We still have people going in with rashes and skin conditions because of it. It's just not acceptable. So this long-term boil water has affected so many of our community members. Even through mental health. We still have the state of emergency that was declared back in 2013 for suicide. That was never lifted. Since February 1, 1995, 27 years ago, when our community has declared, a boil water advisory. That same year, in March, I had a son. He would have been 27 years old today. I lost him through suicide in 2012, November 2012. He never got to drink from the tap. He never got to drink clean drinking water since the day he was born. And that's what all our children today are facing that have never accessed clean drinking water. All the children and youth that are, born after the boil water advisory. It's unfortunate that we have lost so many over the years, including my late son, who never got a chance to drink from the tap as he passed away in 2012. And with this water settlement, I don't agree with it too. I can't even do anything about my late son because the courts are saying you only have to go back so many years. And what about these people that we lost that never even got that chance to have safe drinking water in the community? Who's going to speak up for them? So I too don't agree with the courts and how this was brought out. This boil water advisory that we still have today, it's just another form of genocide to our people. When is it going to end? Everybody is entitled to safe drinking water. And I don't know why we have gone this long to not have it. It's just not acceptable. And where I am today, I'm going to keep fighting, keep advocating for our people. Because we need that. We live in one of the richest countries in the world. And we don't even have clean drinking water. And I think you know, enough is enough. Something needs to be done. It's been way too long. And we're starting to see more and more mental health issues arise in the community because of this. Okay, I'd like to end it with that, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. Thank you, Honorable Patty Hajdu. Miigwech.
Okay, thank you, Roy and Sharon. I'll just say a few words. I think it's clear the frustrations that our community is facing, because it's been over a quarter century when we're talking about the necessity of life for any person, whether if they're living in the community of Neskantaga. So it's important that we acknowledge that, and we also know how the justice system, the European legal system, oftentimes victimizes the most vulnerable. And I think it's important that we also have to acknowledge that. You heard from two of our members that spoke about that, the injustices, the things that have gone, the limitation periods of the court system, the way things are being portrayed, despite the fact that you have long-term suffering. Even when the boil water advisory is lifted, there's going to be further suffering. And that's what you hear from these two speakers that spoke. This is real. This is the truth about what's happening in our community and maybe in other communities. When you don't have the basic necessity of life, when you don't have clean access to clean drinking water in your homes. You heard a mother just spoke here. Her son would have been 27 years old. We have another mother in the community when her teenage daughter took her own life while she was getting water from the water treatment plant, a reverse osmosis unit. Those are tragedies that we cannot forget. And we must do better in order to ensure that we avoid and prevent those kind of things. Sharon said it best, the time to act. Enough is enough, where the most vulnerable are being dictated by somebody else, by policies that don't necessarily work in our communities. So I wanted to thank Roy and Sharon for their words, for sharing their experiences. This is real. This is the truth, what we're seeing in our community. And I'm grateful for their for sharing that, because this is a retrospect of what our community is right now. We're still living in a boil water advisory, 27 plus years. And we know that there is disagreement, has some, is a path, is something that we can look at, definitely, but there still needs to be a lot of work. There still needs to be a lot of healing. There still needs to be repairs of the harms that was inflicted on our people, not just in Neskantaga, but right across the country. It's so critical. If we want to build a reconciliation, a path to healing, we have to address these basic fundamental rights of individuals, especially when our most vulnerable, our youth, our children are impacted. And this is something that's very heartbreaking when we continue to see that in our community, when we continue to see those kind of injustices. And we hope that the healing will start, a path to reconciliation, true action-oriented, that's going to impact the lives of our people at the local level, not elsewhere, but in our homes, in our young people, in our young mothers, in our young fathers, and the grandparents that live in our communities, to be able to have the basic necessity of life, which is clean access to clean drinking water. So miigwech, Minister Hajdu, thank you for the prayers from the elder, and also our sincerest thanks to Roy and Sharon for sharing their experiences. Miigwech, thank you. Yeah.
Miigwech, Chief Moonias and Roy and Sharon for sharing your stories so rawly and so truly. And a special miigwech to Sharon for speaking about her son and the loss of her son as a mom. I certainly can't imagine anything more devastating than losing a child. So thank you for sharing those stories. I will now turn to Chief Doreen Spence of Tataskweyak Cree Nation to share a few words. Chief Spence.
Hello. I'm just going to take my glasses off. Before I get started, I want to thank Elder Eunice Beardy for the opening prayer. And I also wanted to thank Chief Moonias and his members as well for speaking. I can just feel and hear your emotions and when you guys speak, and I feel the same way too. But, you know, I have notes here, but I don't really think I'm going to follow. I'm just going to speak from what we've been living through, I guess. With this announcement for this well watery advisory, you know, we had to fight for this. Everything that First Nations want, you know, when we advocate for our people, there's always a stumbling block that we have to, you know, we have to make everyone aware what we're feeling, what we're dealing with, what we're living with. And I think it's hard too for, I don't know, like ministers or federal government to understand, because you guys don't see the everyday impacts of what we go through. I just wanted to, for some of you that don't know, we live in Tataskweyak Cree Nation, which is Split Lake, Manitoba. We've been under a boil watery advisory since 2017, and it was extended again in May 2018. So it's been like 5 years already. And I know that my time as a chief and even a counselor, and even years before that, members from my community have always known our water is not safe to drink. Not having clean drinking water has devastating effects on all of us in consequences, I guess, too, for every generation. I just wanted to speak to, like, on behalf of the ones that are just being born or in the last 20 years or so. I would really say how the water's been changed over time. These young people don't even know what normal water is, drinking water. I bet you if some of them went to other First Nations or other areas, they're taken away, they're blown away sometimes on how clean the water is that they can actually see. Not in my community. Our water is polluted. So my time as a chief and council member too, and working alongside with my other council members and, you know, input from all of our members, especially our elders, some have passed on already. I want to acknowledge one of them. His name was Victor Spence. He passed away this winter. And he's always been advising myself, not just myself, but other chiefs as well. He worked for the First Nation for about 30 plus years. And whenever I needed advice about anything, he was there and, gave me input, and he just passed along what was shared with the elders that he worked with too, or what they talked about, what the former chiefs talked about. But I just wanted to do a little acknowledgement for him too. Right now, even with this announcement that's being made, I can tell you right now too that I'm not happy about it either, because I know that these other First Nations have been on a boil water advisory for many years, 20 plus years, and they're only being compensated for a set amount of number of years, which I think is unfair. We all have to live through these impacts, and I know that this compensation is supposed to help, but to me, that's not the foremost thing. It's me having access to that clean drinking water. So I know over the past years or so, we've been really fighting and advocating to have a clean source of drinking water. And I believe right now that is happening. It is going to happen, but that's going to be another number of years until it's put into effect. But during this time, we are still using our own source revenue, our own funding. We've hired our own hydrologist to work alongside with us, because we're doing our own water quality testing as well. And we will probably continue to do this for many years, because we're impacted too, by industry, I guess. Most of the water that flows from the city of Winnipeg, I should say, flows directly to us. And I just read an article just last night that came to my attention that so much sewage was leaked when they had this high water rainstorm or this past weekend. And all that raw sewage is going to be coming to us. Like, to me, that's unacceptable. There has to be better plans and commitments, I guess, from even the province, I guess, in terms of what exactly are you guys still continuing to do with us, First Nation people? I'm pretty sure that everyone is aware too about what's happening here in regards to doing this litigation, is making the federal government aware of this injustice, I guess, of not having clean drinking water. And I'm glad that both chiefs here, Chief Moonias and also Chief Emily Whetung, have been part of this. Because we're not just doing it for our First Nations, it's for everyone, all the other First Nations across Canada. And I know that every First Nation as well has their own unique, different problems in terms of water quality and service, I guess. But I wanted to mention this too, like this settlement agreement, right? Is making a promise to end all boil water advisories. And we know that this is not going to happen overnight. We all know that. And even if this continues for us to argue for what we want, that stumbling block is still there, because we know that federal government usually dictates in terms of, no, this is what you're going to get. This is how we're going to get rid of the boil water advisory. But you know what? I think that's unacceptable. And if you talk about this reconciliation with First Nations, then you really need to hear what we want. You need to hear our input. Yeah. But I'm going to let Elder Beardy speak as well, but I want her to speak too in terms of long ago of how our water was and how pristine it was. I also want to mention that the settlement agreement until we have clean drinking water flowing into the taps of my people, then I would believe that the federal government has honored us in terms of providing that, removing these boil watery advisories. I also wanted to mention too that the federal government, I think this is important that I say this too. Federal government always follows what Health Canada wants in terms of what exactly is clean drinking water. Well, with our First Nation, we disagree. So that's why we've put in additional dollars to do further testing, because we have toxins in our water. We have blue algae. I don't have the correct terminology, but I think it's cyber bacteria. And I think a lot of First Nations should be aware that if it's in our water, it could be in yours too. And I think that further testing has to be done. And, we're working closely too with a hydrologist as well. He's been working with us for a number of years. And I think it's important too that, we shouldn't be so accepting, I guess, in terms of Health Canada, the federal government saying what's best for us. We know what's best for us. We're the ones that live it. We know what's happening in terms of the water and how it's affecting our members. What Sharon mentioned there earlier in terms of rashes. We have those too. We also have people with stomach ailments. And I honestly believe too that we have lost people due to cancer. And I wanted to mention this to the minister too, Minister Hajdu. I would like to send a personal invitation for you to come to Tataskweyak Cree Nation. Come and see our community so you would get a better understanding and see firsthand our living conditions and see what we are living with. And you could hear yourself from other people speak. And having to not live with clean drinking water all these years. So if you really say that, reconciliation to make it up for us, to our First Nation, I think you ministers need to start coming to our First Nations to see firsthand what is in our community. Then maybe you'll have a better understanding and realize how we're deeply impacted by not having the access to clean drinking water. But I want to finish. I want to thank the other chiefs, for being part of this. Chief Emily Whetung from Cree First Nation, and I believe that there was another Chief Moonias, and this is the new chief that was taken over, I guess. I want to thank you guys, and I also wanted to thank my council members, and I guess my community as well, for bringing everything to light. Thank you. So I'll let Elder Eunice Beardy speak.
Chansi. Nanas ko manumagipe. Pagit na uyan, pagit ni gawian pe. At simuyan hista. Maganwi kagwet sumawag sa manito. Kuma igawi apastayan pigis ko entayan sidotahigogo egan sidotahig. Yagana Simon. I agree to everyone here, and I would like to extend my thanks to the three chief trio for not giving up. I have a lot of issues about our water, the quality of water. When I was a little girl, the water was so clear we could just drink right out of the lake. We used to be able to throw dimes in the water and swim for them. And we used to do a lot of swimming. We used to go out on the boats. We used to look at the fish swimming. It was very healthy, our water back then. Nowadays, you can't see your hand. When you put your arm in the water, you can't see the end of your hand. That's how polluted our water is. You know, this pollution to our water is caused by the corporate sector hydro. They don't realize the damage that's been done. Because years ago, nature automatically cleared our water. They purified our water. There was plants there that did the purification. And there's a lot of waste that goes into our water. You can see it. There's a lot of damage done to our community people. Those damages have already been mentioned by the other band members. There's rashes. I suffer from H. pylori myself, and that's from the water. And it's not a very good feeling when you're under that pain. I lost a sister-in-law through there. And, you know, I'm an educator as well. And back in the early 70s, our children didn't have any difficulty learning. Now today, they're not retaining information. There's a lot of things that's happening to our youth. Mental health issues. And that's caused by the water. You know, in our culture, we look after the water is sacred. It heals us, it cleans us, we live. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the water. And we also look at the whole picture. Our animals, our fish are also being affected by the water. And I really feel for those that don't have a voice. To talk about how the water is affecting them. And I really pray the government listens with both ears. You know, it's time that they heard our people and listen to them, not just give them a little bit just to keep us quiet for a while. We have to think about our future generation. They need that clean water. I was just reading through some of the stuff for that class action lawsuit for that water. It's not fair. How can you put a limit on when you start getting sick and when you stop? That doesn't make sense at all. You know, our young people see what happens to us, how we're treated. And I've never been hesitant to bring that up anywhere. We are not treated equally. This is our land. We were put here to look after the water, the Native people, and especially the women. You know, the women, when you're in your mother's womb, you're in water. And that's sacred. That's life-giving from our Creator. And now these children that are being born are having a lot of mental or physical problems just from the water, just from birth, because the mothers have to drink that water. Why is it that other people that come into our communities are treated really well if they're not Native? Why is it the government makes sure that all people in cities have good water? We live about an hour and a half from Thompson, and they have good water, but still their waste comes towards Split Lake. Why can't our water be as good as theirs, as good as the ones they put into the cities? I don't understand why we can't have that clean water for our people. You know, sometimes I just would like to go up to Trudeau and just see if he's really listening. He makes promises, but he doesn't keep them. And that's what's been happening to us all these years. We get promises, but those promises are broken. You know, we have a water treatment plant, but it wasn't, it's not effective. They have to use a lot of chemicals to clean the water, but yet when you're doing that, you can taste those chemicals. How would they like to just have a glass of Javix? That's what it seems like. Sometimes that Javix is so strong just to keep our water clean. But that's not clean water, that's Javix water. You know, these things have to be bought out, things like that. It's about time the government takes note of what's happening in our communities. You know, it's fine to sit out there and make all these decisions for First Nations, but we don't get a chance to voice our concerns and our voice to what we need in our community for our people. And I'm hoping that someday, before it's my time to leave this earth, I see that clean water for our young people. So it'll be there for the ones that are not born yet. I really, it's very emotional for me talking about this. Because I've seen so many of my elders that were healthy leave this earth because of the water. But I was only given 7 minutes, so I guess with that I would ask, what's his name? The Honorable Minister, please hear what we're saying. Take it to heart. Don't just let it sit in the dust like the chief mentioned. We need action. And I know a lot of my other fellow elders feel the same way. But I'm very happy that I was given this time, this opportunity to share my thoughts too. I want to thank my chief for inviting me and allowing me to share some of the past, present, and hope for the future for our communities, all our communities. Well,
thank you very much, Chief Spence and Elder Beardy, for the very powerful words. And I agree, nobody should have to fight so hard for basic human rights. And I think what we've heard so far in the speakers so far is a sense and a commitment to calling out the inequity that so many Indigenous people have faced over so many years, but also a commitment to continue to fight for those basic foundations of humanity, including clean water. And that's what's, I think, good news about the settlement, is that it's not just about individual compensation, which I agree will never make up for ongoing harms in people's lives, but is an acknowledgement of that harm. But certainly, I think, equally importantly, and something I've heard in the fight and determination in all the voices so far, is the commitment and the ability to arrive at a settlement that allows for at least $6 billion to, for once and for all, end all long-term boil water advisories. And you do have my commitment, Elder Beardy, and I know the commitment of the Prime Minister and the Government of Canada to continue to work and to invest those monies as diligently and as quickly as possible so we can get to that vision that you have had and that many elders have for the next generation. So with that, I'll turn to Chief Whetung to give a few words about Curve Lake and your perspectives. Chief Emily Whetung.
Thank you, Miigwech Elder Beardy, for your opening prayer. Since the day I was born, my community has known that the supply and quality of water was insufficient to carry us into the future. Growing up, avoiding tap water was just the way of life. You don't put your toothbrush in it, and you don't rinse your mouth. And you have to make sure you have enough water to get through the long weekend. People would get sick from water. You've heard people in Tataskweyak and people in Neskantaga, they got sick from water. I got sick and my family got sick. And this way of life seemed unending and simply put, the way that things had to be. In 2014 and again in 2016, the lack of clean water in my community took on a whole new meaning for me. I became a mother. I have 2 sweet little boys, and in those moments, my world changed. Every parent out there will understand how your world changes when you first have children. Every parent living on an Indian reserve will cringe as they think of the new challenges I will have to face. It's no longer enough to simply plan for the next long weekend. There isn't enough water in the ground for my children to choose to live at home when they are adults and thinking of starting their own families. My grandchildren would have to live away from me because they wouldn't have clean drinking water. In 2019, I had the opportunity to make a difference, to become part of the history of water advocacy in my community, which has been undertaken for nearly 40 years. For some perspective, that's 20 elections for our chief and council, countless staff members looking for creative solutions. For one particular staff member in our community, this has spanned his entire career. He started working on bringing clean drinking water to our community when he was a college intern, and he's still working on it today. I decided in 2019 it was time to take up my turn in the advocacy role. I ran for chief as my grandfather and his grandfather before him had done. In July that year, when I took office, I had a mandate from my community to find a new way to bring clean drinking water home to us. In October of 2019, the amazing council that I work with supported me in bringing our concerns to court in the form of a class action. We sought support from our leadership organizations locally and nationally, and eventually made our action into the national class action as we stand beside Tataskweyak and Neskantaga today. In February 2020, when I first met then Minister of Indigenous Services, Mark Miller, for the first time, we had a conversation about how the water situation in First Nations needed to change. We discussed how ending long-term water advisories simply didn't accomplish meaningful access to clean water. I explained that in order to be immersed in our language and our traditions, our children need to grow up on the only land base we have left, and they deserve to grow up with clean drinking water. On December 10th, I was able to address the federal court regarding the importance of this settlement. This settlement means that within this decade, parents and caregivers can bathe their children in their homes. This settlement means that additional costs to Indigenous people purchasing water outside of their communities can end. This means a reduction in plastics accumulating in First Nations waste piles, and it can stop finally. This settlement means that my babies can live at home when they're grown. They can build homes in our community, and they can continue to teach their children our language, our beliefs, and have a better start in life than the generations before them. Because the court hearing was on Zoom, I was able to have my children in the room with me. I was emotional then, as I am now, and my son walked over to comfort me because he too understands what it means to be able to live immersed in our culture, our community, and our beliefs. I need to recognize the emotion that you've heard today and the impacts that you've seen over the last 40 years. Miigwech to Chief Spence, because it is always moving to hear from you and the passion that you have for your community. Miigwech to Roy and Sharon for sharing the impacts and their perspectives. And Miigwech, thank you to Chief Moonias. We are all aware of the negative impacts of limitation periods, and we all feel those frustrations. We feel that injustice. But by your statements, I'm reminded of the saying that the best time to plant a tree is 100 years ago. The second best time is now. We will start now and continue to ensure that our future generations have access to clean drinking water. I'm overwhelmed to stand here with you today, 2.5 years after Fort Lake trusted me with bringing clean drinking water home. We now have an agreement recognized by the court that contains commitments to deliver the quality and quantity of water that most Canadians take for granted. We've reached an agreement with enforceable timelines, with built-in dispute resolution clauses that recognize the importance of our traditions and beliefs. Clauses that ensure response times to meet the same urgency of the situation. In some ways, it feels that this agreement was reached at lightning speed, but in reality, it has taken generations of advocacy, and I am honored to be a part of this resolution with each of you today. I also recognize that it will take just as long to rebuild our relationships moving forward. So miigwech to Chief Spence and Chief Moonias, to your communities, for the things that you've shared, and miigwech to Minister Hajdu for making this happen today.
Thank you very much, Chief Whetung, and thank you to everyone today who shared their stories and their struggles and their persistence with us. And I am profoundly touched by the fact that now is the second best time to plant a tree. And so let's keep planting trees together. Thank you very much. And I think we're ready to open up for questions to the media. So I will turn the mic over to the moderator to do that. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to all speakers today. We do not have any questions in the room at this time, so we will move directly to Zoom. If you do have a question, please use the raise hand function. Si vous avez une question, s'il vous plaît, utilisez
If you have a question, please use the raise hand function.
yourself once you've been called upon. And obviously, we have gone over time a little bit, so if we can try to keep the answers short, we might be able to have time to get through all the questions. So our first question comes from Kristen Ajkate with CTV News.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so my first question is for Minister Hajdu. As of right now, there, like you said, there is 33 long-term drinking water advisories in 28 Indigenous communities in 2022 in Canada. What do you say to the elders, the children, men and women who are still living with unsafe drinking water and unsafe water to clean with?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Well, first of all, I say it's unacceptable and that we need to work together incredibly hard to, as many of the spokespeople said today, end the injustice of not having access to clean water, clean potable water in communities. I do have a representative here from the department, Nelson Barbosa. Did I get that right? Last name? And Nelson, maybe you can speak a little bit to some of the work that's happening with the remaining 33.
Thank you for the question, and thank you to the Elder for opening remarks. I would say that of the remaining 33 boiled water advisories, all of those boiled water advisories have an action plan in order to lift those. Those are done in partnership with the communities, and communities are ultimately the deciders of when boiled water advisories are lifted. So the department is continuing to work with communities on a one-on-one basis to lift the remaining 33 boiled water advisories. Thank you.
And I might add, and maybe this is fair, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Nelson, but that we expect 6 or a dozen even perhaps to be lifted later this year. So we're on track to seeing a number of those lifted this year, and certainly we'll continue to work on the remainder.
Yeah, that's correct. Approximately 40% of the remaining boiled water advisories will be lifted by September 2022.
And with regards to the $1.5 billion in compensation for individuals deprived of clean drinking water, how many people are expected to apply for this compensation, and how will people know if they're eligible?
So first of all, I would encourage anyone watching today who may think that they have been affected to visit www.firstnationsdrinkingwater.ca. The settlement is being administered independently of the government, so I'll turn to the Honourable Harry Laforme or Michael Rosenberg to answer some specific questions about how that settlement will be administered.
Go ahead, Michael.
Sure. Thanks very much. So there are approximately 142,000 people in 251 First Nations who will be eligible to claim compensation, and their First Nations as well will receive compensation. The process is to begin by filling out a claims form, and you can find that at firstnationsdrinkingwater.ca. You can also get a paper claims form if that's your preference. And that claims form starts a process where the administrator will determine a class member's eligibility for compensation. Compensation is based on two things. The first is living on an affected reserve through a long-term drinking water advisory. and that entitles you to a per annum amount, a dollar amount, depending on how severe the advisory was and how remote the community was. And the second piece of compensation is for the unfortunate situations where individuals suffer particular harms, real specified injuries that are identified in the settlement. And you heard about some of those today, the skin irritations, stomach upset, right up to cancer. And those individuals who suffered those specified injuries will be entitled to additional compensation by identifying their injuries on their claims form. So that process is ongoing. It started about a month ago, and it's going to run for a year to allow class members to come forward and identify their injuries, be counted, and ultimately be compensated.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Julie Roy, Radio Canada. Julie, if you have a question. Oh, perfect.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, we can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, I'm just going to ask the question in French because it's way easier for me. I'm sorry.
In fact, the government is evoking structural and logistical problems to explain the delay in the work that's been done. So can you explain to me what those problems are? Why aren't things moving more quickly in terms of commitments made in 2015?
Thank you for the question. There are a number of factors that impact the lifting of long-term advisories. Those can include things like construction delays, seasonal delays, impacts of the pandemic, including constructor availability, operations and maintenance concerns. So there's a myriad of potential conditions and considerations that would impact the lifting of an advisory, and that's why the action plans that IST works with communities on a one-on-one basis are so vital in order to unlock those considerations in a timely fashion.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Julie?
No, that's fine.
We do have a few more minutes for questions. If anyone else would like to, on the Zoom meeting, raise their hand, or if you'd like to ask another question, you may do so at this time. Si vous avez une autre question.
If you have any further questions, you may ask them now.
Our next question is from Rick Garrick.
Hello, it's Rick Garrick. I'm doing a story for the Anishinaabe News, but I'll probably do one else also as well for the Wawate News. I just wanted to find out, what do you see for the future to any of the chiefs or the minister?
Well, maybe I can start and then turn it over. I just wanted to add on to Nelson's answer, yes, to Julie, that people can follow along. The remaining boil water advisories are all online, including the stage that the boil water advisory is at and the kinds of considerations that are underway, including by the chief and council as they seek to lift that boil water advisory. But rest assured that we will continue to work with all 33 communities, and I will personally speak to the chiefs on a regular basis so that I understand how best I, as the minister, and the department can serve them as we work through getting those water advisories lifted. Nice to hear your voice, Rick. Rick is from my neck of the woods in Northern Ontario, so it's always pleasant to hear someone from home. I will just say that what my hope is, and I certainly think this settlement helps facilitate this, is that with the additional $6 billion, a minimum of $6 billion that is committed, along with additional monetary commitments for operator training and for equity and operator pay, that we will get to a point where if there is a disruption in water service, as there can be in any community, that we are well situated to immediately manage that so it doesn't turn into a long-term boil water advisory. There is disruption in water delivery, whether it's in Indigenous or non-Indigenous communities, but our goal together with chiefs is to make sure that no generation has to suffer through long-term boil water advisories again, and that we can complete this work of lifting the ones that remain and prevent communities from entering long-term boil water advisories. That's why in my remarks I talked about the number of boil water advisories that have been prevented, because although we don't speak about the prevention part as much, I can tell you that 215 short-term drinking water advisories were prevented from becoming long-term, and that's hard work on behalf of the community in partnership with the engineering team and others at Indigenous Services Canada, but it's worthwhile because it prevents the situation that these chiefs and community members have spoken about today. Maybe if any of the chiefs wish to add.
Hello, Chief Moonias here. Obviously, our situation is a little different in terms of moving forward. We're still dealing with a project, an outstanding project that seems to create more and more issues for the community. So we have an array of issues that we're dealing with, as noted by our speakers in the community. Roy's directly works with the project, and then Sharon works with the community, the type of services that are needed. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of bringing our people up to where they need to be in terms of the medical support, in terms of like we haven't even gone into the finding out what exactly our people are facing in terms of the long-standing boil water advisory exposures that they've encountered. Like we visited houses from time to time where we have little kids, toddlers being bandaged up because of sores and exposures to unsafe clean drinking water. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. And I think this is where the path is in terms of getting some of these things looked into on a more urgent and emergency basis to try to get the supports in place in the communities that require, because we're dealing with not just the medical side of things, also the mental health side, as Sharon alluded, as well as the current situation with Neskantaga's water infrastructure issue. We currently, the project is still going. We're aren't sure when exactly when we can actually have a time to discuss the lifting of the boil water advisory. And also the community right now is at a point, as Roy shared, it's really disheartening, and the trust of the community has gone down since this project has gone over its time frame. So we're dealing with multiple of issues when it comes to access to the clean drinking water, as well as providing the quality of life that the community members, the people, should be afforded with. So definitely there is a lot of work that has to take place, keeping in mind that given this pandemic situation, a lot of our community members right now today have not started the application process of the 1 year window open to file for the compensation for individual applications. Because of the things that we faced as a community, like passings, a COVID outbreak we've had in February, we've encountered a lot of issues as a very close-knit community. We've lost elders. And right now, today, for example, we have elders sitting here at our community center, listening to the words that have been provided by other speakers, the other chiefs, and you can sense the interest and also some of the ongoing issues that they face when it comes to providing safe, clean drinking water for our people, especially elders, and we also have to look at other issues like how do we improve the lives of our people when we don't have the basic necessities of life like the clean, safe drinking water in our homes. We have people that have gone out for medical, never to return, only to return sometimes when they have passed on. And those are things that we continuously face in our communities, in our community. And it's something that it's not by any means a celebratory situation right now in our community, because we're still dealing with an ongoing water situation. We still have people like elders have to sometimes take their wagons 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers just to access our only reverse osmosis unit in the community. We have to fly in at least a dozen loads of bottled water into the community. We do appreciate the support given by the minister and her department. However, this is becoming a normalcy for a day-to-day life in Neskantaga, and we have to change that. And that's something that's really heartbreaking to see, that why our community has to continuously be in this situation. Okay, amigos.
I think if I could share my hope. Sorry, Chief Spence, did you want to go first?
You can go ahead. I'll wait.
Okay. I would hope that this is the beginning of the end of First Nations needing to use class action lawsuits to have basic rights recognized. I think my hope is that from here, communities, like Neskantaga, Tataskweyak, and Curve Lake have access to those necessities of life that we need to build communities and quality of living that resembles the rest of the majority of Canada, given that the resources that Canada's built on are the resources of our people. So my hope broadly is that we will be able to reach that point where human rights are recognized and Indigenous rights are recognized, and we don't have to go to court to make that happen. Watch.
I just wanted to, I'll just be short, I guess. We are still under this boil water advisory, and we will remain under this until we decide that we have clean, safe drinking water. So I know that previously we have had feasibility studies done for underground testing for water source. That didn't work. And right now, what's happening in our community is that we are looking at piping from another source, which is about 6 kilometers away from my community, for piping for better clean access to drinking water. So I know that's going to take a couple more years, and I know we're just having discussions about it right now. And I know that the infrastructure too has to be updated in our community to take on this, and that's not going to happen overnight. And I know that until then, we will continue to have bottled water brought into our community. And I know that some other members as well, if they're capable, they also get water at this other source, which is called Ashian Lake River. But I just wanted to mention too, I hope we don't have to take the federal government to court again because of them not honoring their promises that they're making today by announcing this class action. And, you just have to be aware too, for all of our First Nations, it shouldn't be the department ending these it should be up to our First Nation and any other First Nation. They're the ones that do that, not the federal government. Those will only end when we get what we feel is safe. But I just wanted to mention too that we are still continuing to have all these impacts too that are affecting individuals from all aspects, I guess, from young and old. We have children with rashes, not just children, but some are growing up like that and on their bodies. Babies especially don't bathe in our water. And honestly, there has to be more studies in terms of what's in the water and how it affects our bodies, I guess. There's a lot of cases that have risen, and I think studies have to be done in terms of how H. pylori affects an individual. So until then, hopefully, I don't see us being removed from a boil water advisory, at least for another, I don't even want to mention any years because I can't really, it all depends on how, this relationship, I guess, is between us and the federal government in terms of working together to provide clean drinking water to our members. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that's good. Thank you for your comments, Miigwech.
Okay, we have no further questions on the line, so I'll hand it back to Minister Hajdu, who will invite the elder to provide a closing prayer.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel, and thanks everybody for being here today, for the media, for covering this important story and this important step in the progress towards clean drinking water for everyone. And I will turn to Elder Beardy to close us off in a good way. Thank you.
Kisemanito gananaskmit nanupa agi pewitap miya kisemanito pewita hiya ko gona sa pagit na mahamigos katen tamigo ya kapagusen tamah mina kisemanito gananaskmit nanu ma kitamagis tawya mano huge gona antuen tamah maga kapagusen tamah tawiti hatikani putagiya kansenwak dan sidorta hikuma Ekistenta ho magegwana pagusentaman. Pagusentaman mina to suwen matiko go gimaha nagegada pagititik. Maga tawiti hatik to saganiskena tik to stogisigaw. Suwen matik mina putinimwa gisemanito. Ministanan mina pagusentaman to suwen miya tan sidostama hoge gona pagit negate gona. Ano sa gisigak. Tuwista mo ya ho kintini manan ikaw tayo pewitap mi goya kisemanito. Nanaskumit nan suwen minan mikakinaw na kumagan nan. Hay hay titon hay. Amen.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. That'll end the press conference. Ceci termine la conférence de presse.
That's the end of the press conference.